Hello everybody, CritCrab here with another story, this one about a DM who broke near every single rule in the book just to make sure that the spotlight was on his wife and how cool she is 100% of the time. Roll post. This is the story of 9 sessions of 5e at my brother-in-law's table. I hope it's not too bland, but I have to keep it lean or it won't fit. The cast is 7, 3 couples and our rogue friend. My brother-in-law is the DM, his wife is Druid 1, their neighbors are Cleric Male and Scion Mystic Female, with my partner and myself comprising of Druid 2 and Paladin respectively. The DM has spent a lot of time homebrewing a world for us to play in. I highly value the relationship with my family and am really invested into the story along with my partner. Originally, I was going to write a novel series, R.A. Salvatore is my hero, on our campaign, and even send it to Wizards of the Coast. In that spirit, we have all been recording all of our sessions and I'm able to listen while writing this to make sure I get it all accurately. Session 1. Partner and myself are introduced by DM as bringing our longship into port with just us sailing. DM passes it off to us, and we eagerly roleplay tying the boat up and greeting the harbor master, whom my brother-in-law roleplays as the most miserable piece of shit in the whole world. Despite this, I tried to roleplay and use my high charisma stat to ask where the finest establishment in town is. The DM is a real asshole in character, and despite having rolled high and having max charisma as an Aasimar, he forces me to bribe 75 gold, my starting gold, to be allowed to dock our ship and be directed to an inn. Trying to be a good player and not disruptive, I stay positive in character and we make our way to the inn. DM then describes his wife entering the port. She sails a massive ship into port by herself with no crew, and the DM makes a big deal of this. So I act intrigued and we set off to introduce ourselves to the captain and learned how she did all that, i.e. group up so we can begin. There are 6 party members after all. The DM changes the rules for Control Water and Gust to justify his wife sailing in alone. His edgelord wife then proceeds to describe with utter disgust and dismay to the same harbor master that she, quote, killed her whole crew again, they just couldn't cut it. And her ship is docked free of charge and she's escorted to some bougie inn further into town. And we are left with our pants down at the dock because the DM wanted to exclude us, I guess. So we went to the crappier inn, and with some shenanigans and good roleplay, recruited our rogue player. TLDR, Rogue tried to pickpocket me, I caught them, succeeded on tail grapple, zone of truth, talked to them like a human being, and convinced them to stay with us if for no reason other than I would feed them. The DM tried to have an NPC come over and arrest the rogue, but I won my rolls to prevent them being arrested with no chance to defend themselves. Which struck me as odd, but there was only the first instance of rogue aggro by the NPCs. The DM makes a huge point of saying how bad the food and ale is, and I pretend not to notice because of my abysmal intelligence. But he says it's the most awful fish, etc., trying to cause problems or something. Finally, it gets to the point where my character can't ignore any longer. I tried, he had a low intelligence, so I tried really hard to ignore it. That he was deceived and lied to and shook down for money. So he gets up and goes back to the harbor master to get back his money and give him a stern talking to. There's a 25-minute period here where the DM and his wife have roleplay about how she's the edgiest druid to ever sail the seas. But everybody fawns over her and gives her anything and everything she wants regardless of her abysmal charisma. All free of charge. Equipment, regents, the ship itself. Everything is just handed to her because she's some big bad archdruid. Yes, they insist she is an archdruid even though she is level 6. Whoop-de-doo. When it comes back around to me, I roleplay confronting the harbor master, and the DM apparates what he claims is a massive giant who towers over you. My character is 6'6", and I come to find out this half-giant is only 6'11", or something in session 9. But in session 1 he says over 8 feet of pure muscle. Anyway, and he puts his hand on you and forces you to your knees. Now at this point I had 18 strength and 20 charisma, and he blatantly refused to let me use either to explain to this giant that I just wanted my money back from this shakedown. He says I appear aggressive, even though when asked I clearly state that I'm loudly, cheerfully embracing the man in what to all onlookers appears very friendly. It was 1/4 of my starting gold for context. refused to let me stand or strength check, denied it was a grapple, and said it was just a hand on my shoulder. I wanted to draw my sword and start combat, but decided to try and be a non-disruptive player and basically quieted down at the table until the group moves on to a different situation. Just smiling and nodding and going along with whatever because I was livid inside. When we moved on, I swallowed my bile so as not to sour my partner's first TTRPG experience. 2 of our members didn't come to this first session, so I figured things would improve. The DM said that he's going to make a ruling to fix Call Lightning. Raw, because he thought it was too OP in the backstory I had been writing up for my partner's character, and where I used it raw for story flair to develop her character, not even something in the game we were doing. My partner, who is a first-time player, is a little confused about how Druid works when Druid 1 is getting so many rule-breaking perks, being called an Archdruid while she's denied basic raw spells. We gather around a table together, and the DM doubles down on his control water nonsense, saying she could pilot a ship through the seas by herself forever. I play it off in a stupid paladin voice. "You mean I don't have to row that hard?" And we all have a laugh and pretend it's canon now because the DM said so. But on the inside, I guess I'm a rules lawyer and I wanted to play by raw. Shame on me. So I'm a miserable being so loosey-goosey with the rules. Random NPC sees the rogue with us and tries to start a fight. Is cowed by my paladin saying, "I brought the tiefling." What of it? And we moved on without combat. This is also where the second-hand druid syndrome begins, because the plot hook for my character, that she's traveling the archipelago looking for druidic temples to hone her craft, is suddenly gatekept behind Druid 1, who apparently already knows all about the temples and goes to them all the time. Second-hand druid syndrome will come up again. Druid 1, DM's wife, continues to be lord and master of all the townsfolk, getting all kinds of information and gifts and crew and free supplies and everything else because she is some amazing archdruid daughter of archdruid gods or something. When the DM roleplays all of the NPCs falling over themselves to please the edgelord druid, and the third instance of DM targeting our rogue, as in bullying them with random aggro from NPCs, begins to set a trend of our rogue being abused at the table basically every session. NPC again cusses out rogue, DM excuses it as being local knowledge that the tiefling rogue is a scoundrel, DM brings up rules about frauding and grievance pits, etc., and when I bring up Harbor Master, the DM makes up a dozen excuses why I can't have him punished under the laws of the land we were just in. Fine. I let it go, and we all laugh at the table because I like to diffuse tension with laughter so I can avoid revealing the negative emotion I'm harboring until a more productive time when I can articulate it better. Part of the reason I'm writing this out is to organize it and articulate it in my own mind using the recorded audio to minimize my bias. The DM had decided to give everyone a magical item when the game began, but every item I had requested was shot down, so I simply declined. This resulted in the DM graciously giving my character a compass that would point to either the nearest treasure or my heart's deepest desire if I read an inscriptive on the back. For some reason, we were given this information at the table, but when I attempted to have my character investigate the strange compass he was given, suddenly the language on the back changed. The reason? The DM had decided on a language, not realizing I had picked it up on the character creation. When he realized I could read the compass, he changed the language after asking what we could read and making sure none of us could read it except Druid 1, his wife. It seemed arbitrary and added a lot of time to the game talking and role-playing about this compass that none of our characters actually knew what it did. Despite checking the compass bearing and role-playing with it for 7 more sessions, it did not ever lead to anything. Our session ended with us on the ship bedding down for the night. This was probably one of the top 3 best sessions of the 9, definitely the most tolerable in terms of poor DMing, and violation of Raw in particular because there was no combat, because I didn't want to be disruptive and start one. If you're disappointed thus far, I promise the following stories will include our party members being played by the DM, being drugged and abused against their will, being told you can't attack somebody you knocked prone because they're too low now, and my partner's personal favorite, Druidish language, just to name a few. Hopefully I didn't lose family if this post is ever seen. They're the only people I like to sit with at family gatherings with my in-laws. While these issues were raised with the DM, he seems to be uninterested in any opinion but his own, even to the exclusion of raw material. And he even made a big deal of directly telling me to, quote, stop looking things up when I challenge some of his more insane rulings. Not because I hold up the game or disrupt the table, but because he hates it when I can point to a direct page in the player's handbook that shows he is wrong. I hope the read was interesting enough to be worth the risk. Hope to see you at part 2. End post. An ex-cop disregarding the rules when it's not convenient? Puh! What? What? The DM is everything but all-powerful. They decide where the story goes, how the world acts, and when any given event takes place. So it is incredibly painful to see a DM so blatantly snap the rules to everyone else's detriment. Favoring only one player and leaving everyone else by the wayside sucks and makes everyone think you suck as a DM, but it's not against the rules. But no, it wasn't enough to just make the rest of the table a live audience for the DM and his wife. He felt the need to openly and blatantly act outside the established rules, and when confronted about it, told them to stop looking them up. He needs to stop being such a simp. That's established. But what I want to know is how his wife feels about all this. Is she uncomfortable with all of the attention she's getting? Or is she reveling in it? Is she aware of how the rest of the table feels or no? There will likely be several comments talking about how if they were OP, they would have left much sooner and not taken this BS from anybody. But what's important to remember is that it's not always that easy, especially when family's involved. So let's sit back and see where this goes in the next video. Till next time.